10 years after I'm gone, nobody's going to remember I was around here. They'll remember that somebody did something about this at some prior time. They won't know who the hell it was. And if they see the name Dingell, they won't remember it. And I don't really care. That's not important. I know what I did. Deb knows what I did. My kids knows what I did. My staff knows what I did. I've got a few friends, but they're going to pass from the scene. I'd like to be remembered for a good, strong, tough, smart, hardworking, honest congressman. And if they'll keep that in mind, it'll be fine. I've always loved the job. It's always been an opportunity to do things, help people. And I've had a lot of legislation I've been working on. In the 70s, it was a lot of work on conservation stuff. I wrote most of the major conservation legislation at that time, including major parts of the Clean Air Act, all major parts of the Clean Water Act, National Environmental Policy Act, Endangered Species, a whole bunch of things like that. I passed a lot of legislation, of which I'm very proud. But the most important single one was the '64 Civil Rights Act, for an assortment of reasons, the first of which is it damn near cost me my job. Almost. Not quite. I won that election by 56%, but it was a major issue. The critical thing was this country was ready to tear itself apart on racial questions. And I don't know how much longer King and the others who were making the fight at that time could have succeeded in keeping our African-American people from exploding. I think it was probably the most important vote I ever cast, and certainly one of the most important votes in the 20th century. When we had the Gulf of Tonkin vote, and I was going over there to vote against it because I thought it was a bad idea. It was a rule that most wise people had, was that you don't start a war on the Asian mainland. I got over there and I got to thinking, you know, the president's in charge of foreign policy. I'm going to give him what he needs to do the job. I think that was a terrible mistake. Divided the country, cost us untold number of lives, damaged one way or another, here and over there and amongst the Vietnamese, and cost us an enormous sum of treasure, created inflation and all manner of difficulties, riots, trouble of all sorts. And that made me think a lot about those things, because when we came down to the fight over Kuwait, I really suffered over that. And then we came up with the second Bush, George W.'s effort to go into Iraq. I knew, boy, this is wrong. And I saw Roosevelt's great first inauguration speech. And even at that age, I could tell I was seeing something pretty remarkable, because Roosevelt, what most people didn't realize was that the situation was so bad in this country that almost everybody, even kids like me, were aware that things were bad. And they looked for Roosevelt to lead us out of this mess. And Roosevelt made that wonderful speech in which he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I've lived through the Depression with my dad when he was in Congress. And I've spent much of my life reading about that Depression and reading about what they had to do to bring us out of it and to see that we didn't have another one. This country would have had a full-scale depression if Bernanke, the chairman of the Fed, and Hank Paulson hadn't taken George W. Bush off and pounded on him for somewhere between 2 hours and 2 days. I don't know what the number was, to make him go with what became the TARP Act, Troubled Assets Recovery Act. We were within about 2 hours at one place of all the banks failing, and we were within 4 hours of losing all the companies. we would not have lost Ford because they bailed themselves out themselves. But they'd have gone under because their suppliers would have died. That's why Ford came down here to testify on these things. But the other two companies would have gone. And Ford couldn't go into bankruptcy because it's a family corporation. If they'd gone into bankruptcy, they'd have wiped out that whole family non-voting class stock. And they couldn't do that. And I've got to say, those people had more courage than a daylight burglar, because if they hadn't done it that way, they'd have been in serious trouble. I introduced Dad's bill every year, except the first Congress I was here, because Dad had a bill pending. And then the next one I introduced his bill, and I kept on doing it. And early on, I went through Dad's bill with the Legislative Council, and I found out that about half of it had been enacted, including major parts of National Institutes of Health and all kinds of grants to the states for assistance to people with health problems and other things, all kinds of educational programs for educating doctors and nurses and paramedical folks. And then when we got it passed, it wasn't Dad's bill, but it was a good bill. And so you don't cavil with success. I can still work with the Republicans, and I've always been able to do it, partly because of my dad's friends and partly because of the approach I take. But in this place, you see what a sorry mess it is. Everybody's chasing money, and word is not good. I remember looked me in the eye one time, and I said, "You gave me your word on this?" He said, "I do not choose to be bound by my word." I said, "Fine. You've defined our future relationship." And it's gotten mean and partisan and nasty, and you have all these outside forces that are pushing people to do what is expedient. So I went to Georgetown, and the Jesuits taught me a lot of things that were good. One of which was that the end does not justify the means. Evil may not be done, that good will come of it. And that leads you to some very difficult choices around here. You've got to sit down and have some real tough thoughts about what you're going to do. And so I don't see those things around here the way I used to. And it's led to partisanship you won't believe. She's my best friend. She's the smartest woman I know. She's loyal and decent beyond any telling. She's more beautiful than the spring. She's the most exciting friend I ever had. And we have an absolutely wonderful relationship. And I don't do many things without talking to her. And she doesn't do many things without talking to me. Oh, look, nobody's going to live forever, and there's nobody's going to be in good health forever. I'm still in good health, and I go check with the doctor over here every year before I get ready to run. And he says, "Dingell, you can do it." But I don't just ask him, "Can I do it? Can I do it and be comfortable? Can I do it honorably?" I don't want somebody to be sorry for me. I don't want them to carry me on the floor. I don't want people to be sorry about me or sorry for me. I want to be a guy they look up to. And so I'm going to get out when the time comes. I'll know it. And Deborah will know it. And we will do what we have done every year since I came here. Every year, late in February, we start talking about, do we want to go another 2 years? And why do we want to go another 2 years? And are the arguments strong for us going there, or are they stronger for us getting the hell out? And so far, it's been, stay around. When the last dog is shot, you're satisfying yourself and your own self-respect. And you're satisfying the good Lord up above, and you hope He'll take you take you home when the time comes. And you're satisfying your family and your friends. You want them to be proud of you. And if I have that, I've got everything I need.